Going on,
Your
everybody?
mom.
Oh, oh,
Got him.
oh,
Got him.
what's going on? What's going on, Red? What's going on?
What- uh,
Seriously, I'm lost.
The power's going on. Your mom.
My mom?
Yeah, your mom's going on.
You know, my mom watched a couple of the podcast episodes.
Nice. Shout outs to your mom.
Pretty dope. She's with it, as people say. You know, my
She
mom's
hip
a
with the
TikTok
kids.
celebrity.
What the fuck
Yeah,
did you just say?
my mom is an actual TikTok celebrity. That's
Doing what?
she does crocheting.
Uh,
Mm.
she sits with needle doos poking other needle doos until a shirt is made.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Neat.
Hmm. Well, welcome everybody to OmniaObscurium, the new podcast format for Red and I, formerly Monster Mecca.
Right. It is very good to be here in Los Angeles with the Tonight Show. It's very, very nice. Honored to have Jimmy Kimmel have me as a guest here.
Is it Jimmy Kimmel? That was
I
Fallon.
don't fucking know.
Fallon.
Jimmy Kimmel hosts it now. Jimmy Fallon used to. I don't fucking watch television.
Yeah, I don't even have a TV. I have a computer. Do
I don't have eyeballs.
you can you remind the audience of what this is?
Well, that was a pretty good transition. I don't have eyeballs and very much need a second sight. So we played that game.
Mm-hmm.
And Second Sight is a game about it's psychics and stealth, and it's Metal Gear the Brain.
And it was made by Free Radical. And if you guys know who Free Radical is, they did Time Splitters as well, which is a pretty beloved game on the GameCube and Xbox, I believe. Was it on PS2?
I It was on PS2.
It was
Um,
okay. I played on GameCube.
I didn't know it came out on GameCube. I played it on the PlayStation too.
I think it came out. Oh God, did I get my facts wrong? I know Second Sight was on the game. And that was regarded as like what? One of the worst releases? Yeah, PS2, GameCube, and Xbox. Okay, it was a cross console. Y'all need to go tell GOG they need to bring Time Splitters 1 and 2 to their
But
service.
if you do that, remember, tell them not to do what they've done to Second Sight because the apparent fixes are not very good. I just before we say anything, you played the wrong port.
Well, I played the only port available to me.
You 100% played the wrong port. The PC port is not good.
I I didn't have bugs. Like everything worked. I only had one bug my entire playthrough.
Right, but it's definitely not a game made for a keyboard and mouse.
No, it is not. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like playing that game, just the controls were like, oh, it was harrowing. Like the highest difficulty in the game is just the controls.
Watching you aim is probably one of the funniest things about it to
Oh
me
my god.
because it was just so awkward watching you stand there, eat bullets, and then casually headshot a guy and walk a few slow steps. It was great.
So
Yeah.
who just
What's
said yeah?
man?
Yeah.
You
Oh,
got Matt, the Needle Deeks.
oh, popped in the first recording of the first episode. Funny. I thought we were in a
Oh, dude.
private call.
No, I guess not.
Bruh. Bruh.
Hello.
Can
Lead
I
hacks.
can I real quick just um Needle Deek and I will be playing some Borderlands games in the future, and
Hell yeah.
it'll be interesting because I know Red here, you're not a fan of that, right?
Boring lands. I don't like those games.
So it's a little heads up on what's coming in the future. Um, what I was saying was Second Sight. I like John Vatic as a character. He was really cool. He was in depth. He was fleshed out, and at no
Just the
point.
right amount of cheese.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Like we don't need to know his history as a doctor to understand his situation, and I really appreciate that about the writing. Because at no point did I question who John Vatic was.
Right. You just wanted to know why you were there. Everything kind of happens, and it does a good job explaining the current situation to you.
And spoiler
The
warning, we will get into the ending, just so everybody's aware.
yeah, visually, not not the best looking game at the time. Not the worst looking game at the time, but like definitely not the best.
And this is 2004. Free Radical Designs, well, they
Metal
were
Gear
pretty
Solid
small.
3 was out by then.
Yeah, but Free Radical, they were a small studio, right? And they had like
Right.
their own in-house engine.
I feel like I feel like there was a lot that could have gone into the environment detail more than like characters or weapons or things like that. The particles were all really nice. All of the abilities have really cool effects and stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Especially for that time period. Like I was kind of blown away like how I knew where I was going by the map design and how things were laid out and designed.
Right.
I never felt
It is a
lost.
very well-made game, very straightforward. Everything that they give you as the player to tell you, "Hey, we want you to get a challenge, but also like enjoy the
Right.
experience."
Back on point with the story, like I think Jane Wilde was a pretty boring character, but I could understand why Jane Wilde was really important in the story because her scenes set up John Vadek as this questioner of the psychic phenomenons around him, and then he has to use psychic phenomenons. The only real time I would have liked to see a little bit more interaction between Jane is like if he was like, "Why do I have these abilities?" and you claim to be clairvoyant and things like that. But we never really see Jane do anything psychic except for like precognition, kind of.
Right. She just kind of like is aware of James, and that's just
Right. Or John,
how that
not
goes.
James.
John James John Jingleheimer Schmidt. His name is my name too.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, super dupe. I thought her name was Red.
Dang.
Is there any point in the game where you got like really frustrated with anything when playing on the PS2?
Um, I think just initially learning the game at the beginning, like not the escape segment or the tutorial segment in the trench, but right after that, when you're thrown into the first like real mission guided area, it kind of builds up to this. Like there were a few moments where I got a little bit turned around with my enemies. It was frustrating learning to interact with multiple enemies on screen at once.
Right.
Definitely not a combat centric game. If you try to take it like too heavy handed,
Yeah.
you will die.
Yeah, and they kind of make that pretty clear right in the beginning. Like, you are a doctor. You have 1 day of boot camp, and then you're thrown into a military
Right.
exercise the next
Right.
day.
You're clearly not a trained soldier capable of doing insane shit. You are playing the character provided to you. This down on his luck scientist, not a fighter, being forced to fight shit.
And I mean this sincerely. When I would possess other soldiers, I genuinely felt like those soldiers fought better. I don't know
They
if
were just
that's in my head.
faster. Their aims were more precise and easy to use. Like it was just better.
Right.
They were very accurate to what you're supposed to be.
Until you give John a sniper rifle and then he's a god.
And you just like eat bullets, run in a circle, and shoot a dude. I watched you do that. I watched you run in that circle and then shoot blink the dude because he kept missing you while you were. It was a small ass circle too. That was some really bad AI for a moment.
We're not into the AI just yet, but trust me, I have some qualms. Um, yeah, you had mentioned the graphics and the particle effects, and honestly, I think the game does stand up very well in those regards. Where the game falls short for me was controls. Just I felt like 90% of the time I was fighting the controls; they weren't working with me. Just trying to hang off of a ledge to shimmy my way over somewhere became a huge hassle, and that put
Yeah,
me back quite a bit,
not
especially in the
having
end.
joystick, not having joystick pressure sensitivity in this game makes a huge difference.
Hmm.
There are some moments where being able to gently inch yourself around is fucking clutch. So you absolutely need to play it with a controller. Playing it with a PC means you restrict yourself from being able to hit a few things at a more precise angle and speed than you would want to.
Right.
Right. But you just kind of like wind up you end up going to climb down off of a ledge and just yeet yourself over the side.
It's the same thing I felt about like aiming in combat. Is it would you would aim, but like if your mouse was in the top right hand corner of the screen, right? It would drag the
Right.
mouse to the whatever closest object you're allowed to shoot, not exactly the enemy. And that was really frustrating because you have to like swing your mouse to the other side of the screen to move targets, and it was
So I've seen
not good.
the aiming system in one other game ever. Resistance Retribution for the PSP uses an extremely similar aim style.
Mhm.
The reason it works there and not in Second Sight is because when you have a PSP which does not have a second joystick, you can't guide the direction of the aim with anything other than the face buttons. Having to switch targets was the big key to playing that game. You would lock per target, and instead of getting good at aiming, you would get good at target switching. You get to the point where you would switch to whatever target you were trying to hit as fast as you could, going the proper direction.
Right.
S but that still doesn't justify, like, when you have the ability to do better aiming than that at a time when games were doing better aiming than that quite often. The guys who made Time Splitters made this. They know how to make guns aim, but Time Splitters is also more GoldenEye than it was, Call of Duty.
Right.
So,
Right. And
I guess it makes sense.
if you watch my playthrough, you'll see me like fiddle with the controls quite frequently because I'll go to a first person angle, which you're only supposed to get when you're crawling an event. But for PC, I think it was only for PC. They made that available just by hitting a button.
I probably would have played the whole last game that way.
You just set the stop, you're not allowed to move, and then you hit Q and then you right click and it pulls up the gun and then you can aim. Yeah, it was like, but once you're in like a combat scenario, you're kind of limited. And when you're
See,
in that mode, you don't have like center sight. It still flies around the room, but you can lean around a corner and things like that. And it did make it a
I
lot
feel like
nicer.
I feel like a PC port of this game would have been its absolute best if they just ditched the third person perspective
Oh, I agree.
altogether.
Yeah, I agree. Or they could have kept it and just gave us like hit E to switch whatever you're targeting at, and you can cycle through what you're looking at.
Right. Super easy target switching like any other lock-on based game on the planet.
Right. And I didn't hate because once you learn it, right? Once you get over that old school difficulty curve that Second Sight has you in, because it's from 2004, it's not that bad. Like, other than when I move my mouse to the left or right and it does like a sine wave up and down and I can't do a smooth targeting, it's fine.
The
It,
best way to describe the second sight is good hidden gem, bad commercial release.
oh,
It
yeah.
really is something that probably went much more underappreciated when it launched than it is now. And even now, it's still way more underappreciated than it could be.
I honestly walked in thinking I was going to hate this game, but loved the story. And what I ended up with was I don't hate the game, it's playable, and the story is magnificent.
That
It,
was really what sent it for me. The story in game is one of the few in video games that handles mind things in a very good way. It
oh,
it
yeah.
handles the brain and the chemistry of the brain in a way that makes you feel like these potentialities could be real, right?
Hmm.
This idea that this guy became a victim of his own experiments could be a very real thing.
Right. I mean,
Yeah, the idea that a military would weaponize psychics like that, very real thing.
oh yeah. I mean, there's a little bit more into the story I want to talk about when we get to it, but Griensky, like really interesting character. The final conclusion where you actually meet him, super interesting. Like I did not see that twist coming, which we'll get to. Very good. Um, what I also really enjoyed, speaking on the mind thing, is they added all of these psychic abilities and none of them felt obsolete or unnecessary. Everything I felt I used quite regularly while playing.
Right, they give it's an equally balanced game where they don't ever forget about the abilities that they hand you. They don't ever forget about something that they taught you. They try to get you to use everything you learn the whole time you play.
Like using telekinesis to open doors through gates and interact with the electric gates and the security gates and things like that so you don't get caught, and the cameras in order to remain stealthy.
Honestly,
Very interesting.
possession is one of the most interesting mechanics in the whole game.
Oh, I
Because
agree.
at the time, the only other game I can think of where that had a similar mechanic to that was Destroy All Humans, and that was Juvenile.
Yeah, that was very juvenile. Where Second Sight, I mean, it definitely takes more of an adult approach with their storytelling. There's a lot there that if you're not really into philosophy and psychology, it'll go over your head. But there are some amazing writing points throughout the game, like the entire
There's a lot of really
interaction.
subtle foreshadowing for
Oh,
the whole
oh
game.
yeah. Right after the tutorial, I mean, you meet Jane Wilde, and right away you're thrown into this conflict of philosophy where, oh, you don't think psychic's real, and how do you think we did this, and how do you think we did that, and why are some scriptures representing this? And there's a lot of confounding is that the right word, compounding arguments used by Jane Wilde throughout the story, where it really makes you stop and go, well, yeah, I guess maybe mediums are real.
It's a very interesting, like, why yeah, a game that makes you think about your personal beliefs is a game worth paying attention to, far beyond that of its story, because it's clear that the person developing it is trying to have a deeper conversation with the player.
Yeah,
They're trying to spark a discussion among the player.
especially when you get towards the end, the red herrings that they put in front of you with, some of the flashbacks where you're led to believe that the entire crew died, and are you living now, are you living in the future, or is this just a memory because you woke up on a gurney? There's a lot of intricate philosophies on display here for story writing, and in its conclusion is such a mind bender in and of itself. Like, I, as a writer, learned a lot just from looking at that and how they portray the story, because they do have
Totally
notes.
easy to get lost in the timeline while you're
Oh
playing
yeah.
too. It jumps around. It's really easy for you to be like, this time period takes place after this, when really you could be like right before something that's about to happen.
And
There's a lot of moments like that where it jumps to the future.
or the past. It does a
Right, or the
lot of the
past.
past, or what you're led to believe is the past, but it's the present. And I just love how that storytelling is narrated, because the entire time I thought I was living through two different timelines. You're going into John's head into the past, but what you're really doing is going through the not quite a memory, but precognition of what's going to happen. And you're literally playing that scenario and changing the future. The future sequences throughout Second Sight aren't actually happening. The only one that matters is the last one. And I love that concept. It's such an interesting way to frame this story about John.
Yeah,
So let's get into
that's
the twist. Or do you got something to say?
uh no, I don't have something to say. I was on foreshadowing earlier. I was going to mention I bought Final Fantasy VII Intergrade.
Oh, very cool. We'll have to get to that at some
Yeah,
point.
we'll get to that. I think we should get to the twist though, because the way the game fucks with the player at the end is great.
Oh, so good. Okay, so the like big reveal that Griensky, if I'm saying that right, is not the villain, and he like genuinely cares for these kids, and his experiments for the most part were rather humane, and the town that they were in was so isolated that some form of incest happened over the years, which is why some of the older kids and adults were leaving the village and hiding their psychic abilities. Is super
Good
interesting.
intentions with a very fucked up situation
Oh yeah,
is what it turns out.
super dark. I mean, very very dark.
Very, very unfortunate accident.
And the narration of, oh, Russia's evil and Russia's gonna use this to make super soldiers, and then that twist where you find out Hansen is actually the one with the silver spoon feeding all of these soldiers the lies, and you the lies, and setting up red herrings and false flag operations to convince you that you're doing something right, just to find out that he's been perpetually feeding you crumbs to get you there to capture you and bring you back to America for experimentation.
Right.
Like,
It's a very
amazing,
BioShock Atlas approach to dealing with the player.
right? I really, really appreciate that because it creates an even bigger, and of course, this is a political narrative at that point. I don't want to get into the politics of it, but showing America in a different light where we weaponize things and we're selfish in some regards was also really interesting. And it tells me that whoever wrote this story was a very conflicted person in and of themselves.
Right. They had a lot going on politically in their own mind that led them to think about a lot of internal deep conflicts between what they believed in, their morals, and like the potentialities that come along with warfare. And you could see those things kind of really not coming together at some points where doesn't want to be a part of the circumstance,
Right.
and it just keeps fucking coming at him.
But he can't walk away. And I
Yeah.
and that really made me feel for John because he's like, no, I gotta save these kids. Like, I have to save them. Like, they're just children and Hanson's gonna experiment them. And in the end, you end up fighting actual psyops, like actual soldiers with psychic abilities. And you have to overcome that with very limited ammunition, very limited weapon weapons availability. And the game really does set you up with the presentation of difficulty there, where sure those shock troopers were hard, but at the end of the day, if you were stealthing and you were careful, they weren't too bad. But then you have to fight was it 4 or 6 of these psychic guys out of nowhere, and they use the same abilities and they can go invisible and go heal. Really just showed you how difficult fighting a psyop would actually be and what the soldiers that
Right.
you've been fighting have
Even
been dealing with.
Right, even being a psyop would be an immense task fighting other psyops. So imagine all of these soldiers who are feeding you bullets like a bullet sponge. They probably can't even, in reality, right? Without the player input there, it's probably supposed to be told in such a way that John never even gets hit by a bullet.
Right.
Everything has to be fucking terrifying for these soldiers, and they make note of that. They make
Hmm.
note of your enemies being much more afraid of you than you are of them.
Yeah, especially with the sewer scene when you have to get in with the Latina gang to find Sarge, because Sarge, or I think he went by Sarge, might be Corporal, I'm not sure. Um, he sides with a gang in America in order to protect himself from being assassinated. He stole a bunch of
Good
documents and
subplot.
was whistleblowing.
Good subplot, good little bit of like intricate side story that adds a lot of personality, does really good world building.
It shows that the characters that you were playing with are people at the end of the day.
Right, and it also shows that the world around you has other people affected by what's going on.
Right. Right. There's just a lot to like those narratives where I couldn't put this game down. Every time I would go to work or something like that, I was thinking about it and I wanted to come back and I wanted to beat it, but life happens and you have to take time away. But
It's very enticing.
it's very rare that I have a game that just sucks me in like this one did.
I remembered before I went back and played it, I remembered very fond things. I remembered as a kid being stone confused, but having a great time being confused.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I loved the death scenes. I don't know if you experienced that, but at different points in the game, if you actually take a loss or die, it gives you a scene of you being thrown into an interrogation room and Hanson saying, I am your only friend, and I can't remember. John's yelling, I can't remember. I find that really fascinating because there's actual lore in your loss, which
It
is
sheds
super
some light.
cool.
It shows you that even when you lose, you're still not dead, which is a huge thing.
Right. And did you try to play as stealthy as you could?
I did. I did. Not easy with multiple enemies in the same spot, not gonna lie. Everything just kind of insta sees you when one thing does.
Right. And the other problem I had is like when alarms go off, it's just like they magically spawn behind you and things like that. And that was really frustrating because I was like, oh, I'm going to go hide. And then they immediately know where you are. And there's no cameras, no nothing, even though you ran away and you took down everybody in that room. That got pretty frustrating. The playthrough that I have edited removes a lot of that, but there is the unedited playthrough if anybody's interested.
It's a really good playthrough. I recommend. Some of it is incredibly funny to look at from an outside perspective.
Yeah.
Really, it is.
When I was going through with the editing, I was laughing at myself because there's certain situations where I was like, "Oh, this is obvious now that this is what the game wanted me to do." But in that moment, I had no idea. It was very difficult to understand what the game was trying to tell me to do.
And it can be incredibly silly, just looking so invincible while you're getting hammered on.
Yeah, I tried playing the game on the highest difficulty or challenging mode, as they called it, but fighting the
It
controls and then taking 3 bullets and dying, it was not worth it for me.
it's bad. It is really bad. It's when you play a game like this on its hardest difficulty, you need to be prepared to figure out how to get through situations without getting hit.
Yeah.
That is the only way to get forward. Figure out each situation by situation, checkpoint by checkpoint, how not to get hit, and you'll do just fine.
What do you think was the most pointless ability? Mine's charm. I never used it other than maybe twice.
Same, honestly. I think it has to be charm. I felt that same way about BioShock Infinite. I hate to draw another BioShock conclusion. It's just like something about the way the philosophy is told is very similar to me between those two games.
Fine.
It's BioShock Infinite reminded me a lot of had that exact same level of pointless to it, where the charm ability existed. Clearly, there were moments you were intended to use it, but it was just never useful, even when it was supposed to be. It was totally meaningless. You never were required to use it,
The,
except for the first time you get it.
the game also very rarely inputs you to like talk to people. So like the first time meeting the Latina gang, um, I was just guns blazing and those gang members just kept spawning and kept spawning and kept spawning. And I was like, I'm gonna restart this because something's not right. And clearly you could just shoot your way through and dip straight to the fire escape and go meet Sarge or Corporal, whatever he calls himself. Um, but like actually communicating and running their little side mission was very eye-opening because these people don't know who you are. They have no reason to think you're hostile in the first place. And working with them is very cool because you actually get a completely different model for John if you work with them. You get a tattoo up your arm that shows you have the mark of that Latina gang. And that stays
Which
with you the
also
entire game.
huge props to the devs for branching pathways and dynamic storytelling and what could have been an incredibly linear experience.
Getting to that. Some missions were stupid linear.
Like, take Resident Evil 4's linear, multiply that by 10, it's a hallway.
Yes.
It, again, very few really good branching off moments with a lot of good exploration, but there's a lot of it that's walk forward, shoot some guys, unlock this ability door, walk forward.
Yeah, when your first time going to the Hanson building, where you have to get the UHD to make the video to play it in the theater, that whole area was just so boring and confusing, and I didn't know what I was doing 90% of the time because I was used to being able to like telekinetically pick up an object and bring it to me, but all of a sudden I have to interact with it to pick up the UHD. So there were just little things like that along the way where I was like, "Oh, that's fucking, are you kidding me?"
The game kind of changing its rules on itself
Yeah.
is not ever a good thing for any game ever to devs out there. Just don't change your own fucking rules when you've already established something with the player. Really. You can upgrade stuff, you can advance, you can add on to things, but don't directly change the function of something
Hmm.
halfway through.
Yeah, you can't just change how the player interacts with objects out of nowhere and expect them to understand immediately. Like I was
Right.
sitting there at the computer and I'm like, why the fuck can't I watch this video? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you have to go to this room and get this cutscene. It's like, well, I've never had to do that before. Why do I have to do it now?
That's how you end up with a situation like Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero, where you have to go crouch at the ledge of the platform and get carried by a tornado. But the game literally never gives you any indication that any of that is even supposed to happen.
Right.
Yeah, it's strange, like cryptic ways of just doing stuff to
Mm-hmm.
fill time, I think, which is a big problem. It's a good game. It has a good amount of time. It didn't need little bullshit like that to add extra few minutes.
No, I mean, I'll honestly just remove the theater room, have the video play on the computer. He steals the UHD. I gotta get to the elevator. That's all you really needed is like, and then you would have expanded the level. We would have went up the elevator and had the whole interaction with Hanson, which led to the next mission. And that interaction was great because
Right.
you
And you know
see
what?
John dehumanizing.
All of the times saved developing that portion and building on to what comes after the elevator could have been used to add more detail to that whole environment.
It felt like padding.
Right.
Like they just needed one less puzzle and they didn't have any ideas.
It's the home stretch now. Let's get that last little shreddy bullshit out of the way.
I think that's really my only deep qualm with the level design. I really liked the asylum when you get Jane Wild out. That was super cool. There was a lot of depth and a lot of intricacies to that level. A lot of stuff to look at and hunting for
The
like the little video
introduction is my
games.
favorite part of the game by far, I think. Just the introduction cutscene, bringing you into the game and
Mm-hmm.
watching John freak out the way he does on the table. The whole thing is just such an interesting. It leaves you with so many questions right out of the gate.
You can really feel how this game might have like inspired something like Manhunt with how it opens up and introduces itself.
Right. Take out some of the crazy gore and the snuff film aspects, and this would be a pretty good. That's a really great comparison.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, all in all, I'd have to say, like, if you like older games, like from 2004 and things like that, and this is something you missed out on, I would recommend it. But if you're a novice and you're just passively enjoying video games, this is a hard pass. Just watch a playthrough.
If you remember this game differently than we do, then comment about it because
Oh,
we'd like
yeah.
to know everybody else's experiences with it. It's definitely not a game that is made for everybody, that's for
Oh,
sure.
hell yeah. And we're getting there. We haven't even gotten into like the crazy, not good game stuff just yet, which I guess we can move over to if you have anything to say positive, shoot it out now.
I think we've said pretty much all of the good.
Okay,
We've laid out the good.
I have a couple more. The world design is really good. There's a lot of stuff for you to interact with. The walls have like graffiti and they have artwork and they have paintings and the glass breaks. For 2004, the world really did feel alive. When you ran into a box, it moved. You can pick it up with the telekinesis and throw it at your enemy. There were a lot of intricate things that, we saw with Half-Life 2 and stuff like that that I really hadn't experienced all the way back in 2004. So playing this game now really gives me a good sense of inspiration or what some games might have taken inspiration from because Free Radical was really pushing the boundaries of the engine that they had at the time and they were doing things that I've never seen before for that time period
Right.
and it was
It doesn't
incredible.
it doesn't leave the same impact for me now, but I'm almost certain that if I had seen it at the time it came out and been one of the people who played it at release, I would have been absolutely flabbergasted by what I was playing and seeing.
Oh
How
yeah.
smooth the animation was in a lot of instances, how intricate all of the models and details were, and how diverse everything was, how much variety there was to enemy design was a big thing.
No two levels felt the same and that's very
Right.
difficult to accomplish. Well, I guess some of the soldier missions kind of felt similar.
But like those are that's thematic, isn't it? Military outposts all designed to look efficiently the same.
Yeah, I guess
I,
let's get into
it's
what we don't like.
yeah.
That's a good segue.
Uh, the hit detection in this game is fucking bad.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if it
There's
uses hit scan. I think it's using projectile based shooting too. It definitely feels like it.
which also means that it probably uses mesh collision for melee attacks, which means your player model needs to be literally hugging your enemy to perform any kind of takedown or melee action.
Absolutely true. I tried the melee from behind quite frequently, and it just does not work.
Nope.
Speaking of melee, you cannot melee while crouched.
Which is dumb for a stealth game. A game so heavily focused on you sneaking behind everything and getting around shit. You should be able to take shit out while you're on the ground.
Yeah,
You,
absolutely.
you should be able to hide behind cover and like yeet take down a guy.
I have one more thing that I really, really liked. Um, if an enemy begins to make a radio call and you snipe them or shoot them with your tranquilizer and they go down, it does not mean that radio call does not get sent out. And they have different dialogue where they say, "We're not sure of their whereabouts, be on alert." His radio just dropped and things like that. Really appreciate that attention to detail because it really felt like these people were protecting something.
Right. They're giving you this kind of like real deep involvement, small hints and foreshadowing, showing you that these guys aren't just like brainless heads standing there for no reason. They're posted because they have to be.
Right. Really cool. Really cool. But on that, I also hate it. It's really annoying. Sometimes you would have them pull out their radio and go to talk. You would snipe them, turn around, and there's 3 enemies running around the hallway from a room that you just cleared every enemy in.
Which
Made no
is another
sense.
huge problem. This game uses the Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker method of bringing in reinforcements, where reinforcement enemies literally pop in out of fucking nowhere.
Exactly what happened. It was
They-
so frustrating. Oh, I'll just backtrack and hide in an area because I saw a hiding room, and you turn around and there's 5 people in that room all of a
Right.
sudden.
It's like they have a spawn radius around you, which is absolutely terrible. You can't escape from much very easily.
Nope. There's really no escaping. It's fight
You-
your way backwards, but you can't backpedal and aim and shoot. If you try to backpedal, your character will do a full 180 and then aim in front of him, which means you
Even
can't.
like a Silent Hill
Oh,
backstep would have been cool.
oh, absolutely. Especially if you have the right, in this case, the right mouse button. Press down. Like your character should walk backwards, but John doesn't. He does a 180.
There was always an argument to be made for tank controls, man. Always. And this is one of those instances where having tank controls probably would have benefited this game a lot.
And
At
on
least
that,
aiming tank controls.
on console, did you have the option to go to a locked camera perspective?
It just would automatically switch
Oh,
at
did
certain
it?
moments.
So
Yeah,
on PC, you actually get the option to switch between the two.
that's interesting.
It was really cool. You hit shift and it would go to a locked camera perspective, and you can hit shift again and it would change it. Which came in really clutch because sometimes I had to like look around a corner or something like that. So hitting shift, I can see the whole hallway.
Yeah, the console version, the PS2 version is very Metal Gear Solid like in that when you got to a certain area, it would auto pan the camera so you could kind of stealth your way through shit. The only way to
Interesting.
change the camera away from that would have been like getting out of the area or getting into combat would bring the camera back down.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I could be in the locked camera position and fight even. Huh. Seems like this port actually added quite a bit that neither one of us were expecting.
Yeah, they did a lot with it. I still, play it with a controller because it just feels more comfortable, I think.
I think I
I
would
know
have
you
had a
can
better
remap the
time.
keyboard and mouse controls, but you can't change. There's no substitute for bad mouse.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, all honesty, I would not play this on PC ever again.
Go go buy a PlayStation 2 copy if you plan on playing it. Play it on its authentic hardware. It is really a good game where it's intended to be. You know what? You need it with all of its bugs intact. You need it with exactly how it was put together initially. You'll have a decent experience if it's your kind of thing. If you're interested in, if you like Metal Gear Solid, it's a big recommend.
Yeah. Yeah. I do feel like though, like I want to give this game a higher rating. Obviously, we're not in the ratings just yet, but when it comes to like models, they didn't age well. The voice acting aged well, story aged well, gameplay did not age well. Map layouts, spawning. It's overall a very clunky game to play, but it's not dark clunky. It at least works.
Right. It's Prince of Persia clunky, classic Prince of Persia clunky, where you can learn to do it.
Right.
It's a very step-by-step procedure where you learn to play the game, and it turns out well.
And it comes a long way for me to say that, like being somebody who played Assassin's Creed Bloodlines live in a marathon. um, learning Assassin's Creed Bloodlines was near impossible. The game does not work. That's just
No. No.
the end of the
Yeah, that game
story.
is fucking broken.
If you would have handed this to me when I was 14, which would have been oddly the correct time period, I would have been like, "Oh yeah, this is fine. This is a completely playable game." It would have been on Xbox, so I would have had the best experience.
Right. You'd have had the anti-aliasing, the best visuals, the smoothest
hmm
frame rate. It would have been the best experience.
I don't like I, I don't like some of the characters. There's kind of stereotypes. I like the Latino gang can be kind of stereotypy in some regards. I understand that it's a product of its time, and we as a people have kind of moved away from those things. But that's more of an opinion than anything else.
But also, like, is it stereotyping? Because, like, given the time period that the game itself takes place in, that is how that gang would have been behaving. Right? It's less a stereotype, more a period piece.
Period piece is fair. Yeah,
I think stereotype is when you take something from a period piece and you apply it to the modern day, right? As if it's a common occurrence.
fair, fair. I mean, I don't really have the information to say otherwise. It just kind of rubbed me the wrong way in some
Yeah.
regards. Like, I don't know. I don't want to get into it, but like there were just some points where some characters acted a certain way, and I was like, eh. But I mean, that's not a deal breaker with me. It's just that's just the
Yeah,
way it is.
cheesy cliche shit happens. All it fits in well with some of the other games cheese. Some of the game's other cheese.
Right? It does.
Like, the game is top tier fucking dialogue, man. The voice actors on point in their remote
Oh yeah.
locations, not interacting with each other.
I mean, even some of the characters like behind doors and things like that were voice acted very well to the point where you can pinpoint the exact model that is speaking if you've been
An
playing long
early
enough.
with 3D audio, very impressive.
I did not expect 3D audio. When that came through my DAC, I was like, "What?" Not expecting that. And it's like 4D, right? It's a four directional or six directional audio. I
It's
I didn't have up and down. I just had panning.
yeah, it's just x axis audio.
Oh, and Z.
Y x some y x axis or y axis audio. One of those. Y axis is up and down.
Yeah,
X axis audio.
x-axis with a Z distance volume control. Which is, I mean, that is not easy to program. If you've played Phantasmaphobia and things like that, like this is kind of a new thing for microphones doing it, people speaking. But there are a lot of games that still to this day do not do 3D audio. They just don't.
You can tell Second Sight was a game that was made to be played with a surround system and the Dolby Tech at the time.
Oh yeah. It's supposed to put you on edge. I mean, it's a very uneasy game. Some of the noises, the end of the game with the screaming from some of the prisoners.
Like you get like partial horror mixed in with partial action mixed in with lots of psychological thriller, and it's just this real mishmash collection of stuff that the audio works really well to blend in with.
Right. I think it was great. It was geniusly done. Let's get into like the philosophy and the psychology of it then, because there's a lot to say and there's not a lot to say. It really depends on who you
On
are.
yeah, really. On the one hand, kids are important, save children. On the other hand, does he save himself in from like becoming a fucking permanent weapon or not? You know,
Right.
one of those things that like he's got you as the player presented with the stakes, and the character is given this very serious decision to make, and you can tell that throughout the entire game he's being fed information from every angle trying to build that decision, and
Yeah.
it's just not happening.
like all honesty, like how do you live with yourself after playing that game? Like John was a doctor with an oath of protection, and then he believes he's defending his country, and next thing you know, he's fighting his own country, and then he's trying to save kids, but in the process, he has to expose the government. Like there's a lot there for people to reflect on with that deeper moral obligation. And
Right. It's a dichotomic story where like you're thrown for a loop, you don't expect it, but suddenly it clicks in your head, certain things tie together and it makes sense that everything led up to this twist. And they were giving it to you.
there's a lot there. I mean, like philosophically, just speaking on like what the game expects you to do. Obviously, it's framed in John saves the kids and kills Hanson. That's how it's well, the kids kill Hanson technically, but you allow it to happen. John just watches as these children rip
And you know
apart
what? In the
Hanson.
beginning, you don't question your morals right out the gate. It takes a bit to build up to you gradually starting to question your morals more and more while you play.
Yeah. I mean, releasing the prisoners from the asylum in order for them to take on the guards, so that way you don't have to. I mean, that's an objectional, wrong thing to do. I think most people
Right.
would say these people are in here because they're violent offenders, and you're just like, yeah, whatever, let them out, go let them go kill these NPCs because they're both NPCs. But then there's weight to that. There are
Yeah, your morals are
consequences.
telling you that, like, even though this is a terrible situation, operationally, it is also the only thing that keeps this progressing in the manner it's supposed to.
Right. And I
Which brings this you to this like, wait, man, I don't know how I feel about this anymore.
and they were like,
Mindset.
oh, the one of the inmates stole a key, and it's like, oh, so I have to go like release the inmates and look for the key by knocking them out or killing them. And it's like, oh, that's really, really dark. And I did it.
It's not
Like,
just
wow.
it's not just dark, it's downright evil quest line in Fallout Dark.
Oh yeah. And then they none of the inmates even have the key. It was in the storage room the whole time. So you
Right.
go and you
So
do
it was
that, and it's not
totally a
even the right
tragedy.
answer. Oh,
And the game does it just to fuck with you.
yep. It's all moral compassing. It's all to lead you to question your decisions, which all
Fucking incredible.
comes down to the grand finale of John using precognition, realizing that he, where was he? He was with Hans or with Kriensky when his precognition took over, and he began to
Right.
realize, and he went and he
His giga brain processing power can prevent a bad situation.
right, because the beginning of the game is the end of the game, but only the end of the game if it's a failure, if you die or quote unquote die, which
Right.
means everything that happens in the game from the time you go into boot camp to the end is the actual storyline, and that it's just fucks with you the entire time.
And you know what? It does a really good job of it because it never gives you too much. It never gives you too little. It gives you just enough to leave you asking the question.
Not only that, but it doesn't matter. You don't need to know the perfect timeline. Neither does John, and he doesn't understand how his abilities work. Neither should you. You don't
Right.
need to question it.
You brought the interest up, and now you're less worried about figuring out why it's there and more interested in where you go from here.
Right. I mean, you. This was your recommendation. You're the one that was like, Ian, you got to play Second Sight. I was like, I don't know, man. I've seen this game at like GameStop for like 25 cents. And you were like, no, you gotta play it.
It's such an underappreciated classic for what it is. It stands up next to the other stuff that Free Radical did at the time. They were a very well constructed game studio pumping out really great shit, which is why I always say I bring up games like Alpha Protocol where people hate it. And I'm the only human being who seems to like it. And it's got this incredibly deep psychological story and all of this really good world building and character building. And for some reason, nobody remembers it fondly but me.
I
And
feel
even
like
going back to this game, like this one specifically, Second Sight, going back to it, it was still a really good experience. I felt really interested the whole time, just as interested as I was like 5 years ago when I played it the
Oh,
first time.
absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Me too. I mean, obviously, I didn't play it in the past, but for my first time experiencing it, yeah. But when you say that, I can't help but I gotta quote like Jake Geller, H Bomber guy, those guys. There's not a lot of people doing deep philosophical breakdowns of video game stories like people do with films. I mean, video games are not a new medium. We know that. There are a lot of people
Right.
doing reviews, but there's a difference between what we do and a review. I don't look at what we do as a review. We are looking at something more coherently as an art piece.
Right. We're digging into it from our perspective as creators.
Right. And if you guys like stuff like this, go check out H Bomber Guy, go check out Jake Geller. There are others who do, hour long, 2 hour long breakdowns of games to like the finest details. And it is very important to have this understanding of what makes a story game a story game. Is
A
it
big problem goes lost on a lot of people. Knowing your protagonist is a big part of playing a story game to its fullest.
Mhm.
Knowing how your protagonist thinks, thinking about how your protagonist thinks, questioning how you think while you make the decisions that you make during a game's gameplay. It really does build a story game's immersion.
I always reference the one DC writer who said, in order to have a good hero, you need to have a good villain. Well, in Second Sight, this whole time I'm told Gransky's the villain, then he's not the villain, and then we find out Hansen's the villain, but he's just doing what he's told, but he's also a total lunatic. So at the same time, I can be empathetic towards both parties, but also be empathetic towards John, which creates, again, a more philosophical question. Should Hansen die for his actions? Obviously, the government sent him to do it. He did it willfully. So should he just go to court and be judicially trialed?
But
Like,
then brings
it's
up the
so
whole question of
complicated.
whether or not it was willful, and yeah, there's a lot that actually goes into thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
And it provides this sense of like you want to also know more about your villain, like you want to know about your main character, which is a driving force to push the story forward. You
Yeah,
don't need to know your lore in the past all the way back and get all of this over explained nonsense to get a good sense of why you are moving forward toward the conflict.
right. And I don't know if you agree with this, but I mean, Skyrim is a great example where you're thrown into a world, you're thrust into a world, and there is a lot of story there. Not going to diminish that fact. But the game does deviate quite frequently from what is quote unquote your main goal. And of course, this is an open world game. That's bound to happen. But let's go one step further. You have something like The Legend of Zelda, which is not a story about Link. No matter what anybody says, philosophically and psychologically, that is a story about
It's a story
Ganon
about
and
Ganon.
Zelda. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a story about Link. He's just in the world doing his thing.
Right, he's the plot device used to carry the story of that's why it's called The Legend of Zelda and
Thank
not The
you.
Legend of Link.
Unless you're playing the second one, then it's Adventures of Link. But anyways,
A game like Resident Evil 7 where there's a clear story, but there's so much more there. How Ethan is thinking in the moment, what's going on with the mold, how he's reacting to the environment and things. And they carried that really well into Resident Evil Village.
what I really enjoyed about Resident Evil 7, and I don't talk too fondly about Resident Evil 7 and 8, um, I felt like Resident Evil 7 turned the tables. How do we tell a story with a really good hero at the end?
With a human being
Right,
instead of a well-trained, well-armed, well-equipped special forces soldier or some kind of well-armed, well-equipped special unit police unit. What about a regular fucking guy with genuinely compassionate morals and drive pushing him through a situation just as terrible?
right. And
And you don't just see it, you feel it.
I got a lot of that from playing Second Sight. Like it gave me a lot of those memories of my first time playing through 7 and 8 because John is not a bad person. He does bad things. That's very
Right.
different.
He's also not your standard hero type. He's just a guy. He's a scientist. you couldn't be the action hero.
He says it throughout the story. Then why am I here? He says it to the military. He says it to the other people. Why am I here? And Jane's like, you have to be here. It's your duty. I picked you. You're meant to do this. I'm cognitive. I'm clairvoyant. And he the whole time he's like, but why? And even in the end, you still don't know 100% why. You just know that he had latent powers. We don't know why he had latent powers. Scientists were creating these soldiers. How did he get them? There's a lot more
I sort
there.
of formulated this theory that they used him to create this kind of like perfect life form test subject that they could clone and manipulate genome types off of. But that goes deep into like the science of the game and how the experiments play
Right.
out and shit, which they still cover very scarcely when they cover it.
And even when they do cover it, like, I think that's a very rational opinion. Like, they took skin samples and things like that and used his DNA. And in the auditorium room, you kind of see a little bit of that. But when you fight the super soldiers for the first time, none of them look like you. They all have like augmentations and body mods that you don't have. And I found that really fascinating how they're retrofitting and augmenting people in this cyberpunk kind of way in order to have these psychic latencies withdrew from their mind.
Right. Reverse experiments for the experiments that make shit even more twisted and visceral than it was before.
It is. I mean, at the end of the
In
day,
hindsight, it is a very fucking disturbing situation.
oh yeah, the Second Sight is a very, very mature, very dark, deeply philosophical game. Like, this is the first game in quite a long time that made me stop and like really question the like what I am doing. And since I'm live, I don't get to stop my gameplay or anything like that. Like, I just have to keep barreling forward with the mistakes that I'm making as a
In the
person.
middle of your stream, while you're going through everything, you're having these thoughts, and you know what? It shows. You can tell when you get quiet, when your face changes. They're just reacting to things in game as they are happening. Whereas, like, I've seen you in a lot of other cases go through something, not even react to it at all, and then think about it after the fact once it's already over with.
Right.
And it never is a huge thought in comparison with like this game must have had you so lost in thinking about it and yourself and the story it was telling and all of the moral questions that it encompasses that you just there was so much time you spent looking confused.
Yeah, and honestly, I was, because I knew Free Radical was known for doing these really intense time loop, time inconsistency story arcs. And I'm looking for that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm going in with precognitive ideologies. I should remove that for the game. And then ultimately, I'm surprised because they somehow managed to loop all of their insanity in their writing back into it.
Right. It found a good way to take all of the cognitive experimenting and all of the crazy mental manipulation and metaphysical shit that they were using and pull it together without it crumbling in on itself and creating plot holes everywhere.
Right. Because, and I've said this before, especially like when we were working on The Last Particle, you don't need to tell every story. Sometimes the story should just tell itself.
Right.
And that's what Second Sight does. You don't need to know why Hansen's doing the things he's doing. The fact of the matter is he's doing it. And that's the problem. He's doing something that you are directly involved with and you need to intercept it. And that's your goal. But along the
Right.
way, there's all these tiny intricacies and there's this web forming of just disturbing, dark,
You always
gruesome.
want you always want to know the why, but ultimately you tell yourself that you don't need to know the why to know what your morals in that moment that are. Right.
Yeah.
What and exactly how you feel about just what you're doing. That's that's a big thing for me in video games. I like video games that make me question myself. That's always something. That's why I go back to Fallout as much as I do. In a game like Fallout New Vegas, where everything is political and everybody you talk to leaves some kind of impact at the end of the game, it changes things.
And it
It
creates a
changes.
conversation, which is
Right. Yeah, at some point you're even afraid to say the wrong thing in Fallout.
right.
So you're asking yourself, you're talking to yourself about like, what is and isn't appropriate for this situation? How do I plan to carry myself? Is what I'm doing right now actually the right thing to do?
I mean, Fallout is a wonderful example. I mean, even in my own streams, I have a Brotherhood of Steel flag flying behind me. But what a lot of people don't know is I fly it ironically. I don't like the
They're
Brotherhood of
pieces of
Steel.
shit.
They're pieces of shit.
They suck.
I mean, when
I have an umbrella flag behind me now. And who the fuck likes umbrella?
when you get down into it, like, and this is in relation to Second Sight, and I'm getting to it. You know, you play something like Fallout New Vegas, and you have to like make these decisions, like who are you going to side with, etc. The good answer technically is the followers of the apocalypse, technically. But at the same time, that's not technically an ending for the game. They're just this free market of ideas and
And
medical institute.
that's what makes a conversation like this great, because morally I would be on the totally opposite end of the spectrum and say that the house ending is probably the way to go.
Right. And you've made this clear in previous episodes, and I always end up somehow managing to rationalize to myself that the NCR can be better, and I always side with them, hoping that they could be a better organization. But they're so corrupt, and it's like, oh, why do I?
And that comes with a
Mm.
lot of like, the game feeds you propaganda from every side the whole
Yep.
time.
Yep.
Right, which is something that's hard to do. In a game like Second Sight, where they're feeding you subconscious propaganda, it's so hard to recognize that you are being given lies for a lot of it.
Uh-huh. You
And so
go
you really, as a person, kind of have to distinguish the lies yourself.
go off, King. You got this.
Right. It's just so when I stop and I think about propaganda being fed to you in a video game about the story, right? And I think about like a character misleading you or a sign misleading you or your environment itself taking you in the wrong direction or you being told you were supposed to do something that you weren't. It brings me back to a game like San Andreas, where the entire game is a game of something you were not supposed to do.
Right. It's
That
very
the
interesting. I mean, it also tells me that this writer is a very intelligent person.
right.
Like, it's very clear to me, like, this person was racking their head around the political landscape that they were facing around themselves. They were thinking about different conspiracy theories, the psyops, the MK Ultra, all kinds of stuff. And you can feel that when you play this game. There's a lot of out of the game experiences that fed into writing this. And as a writer, you know, I'm the same way. I mean, we just had a conversation the other night, and to tie it into politics, I don't want to talk about politics right now. I am exploring a very vast web of different ideologies because I feel like I don't know enough. And when I want to write, I feel like these are the kinds of things that I should be able to intrinsically put into my stories. The writer of Second Sight knew what he was doing or she was doing when writing this.
Right. The writers between the both of them worked on games like Donkey Kong Country, 007 Perfect Dark. The other guy worked on Time Splitters, Dark Angel, Second Sight, Among the Sleep in 2014, Battlefield 1, games that had a lot of really, really good psychology,
Among the Sleep is incredible.
right? He was the
Incredible.
artist on James Cameron's Dark Angel. Very interesting.
I have not
This
played
is
Dark Angel. I own Dark Angel. I just haven't played it.
I mentioned the writers. David Doak and Andrew Lawson wrote Second Sight.
Thank you so much for this game. Shout out to them.
Thank you very much for this game. Also, Rob Letts, the director, thank you for this game because putting
Absolutely.
a game together is very, very important. Keeping your team organized is very important.
And understanding the ambitions of a writer. Like, it's something
Right.
that goes a long way. Really listening to your writing staff and your artistic drafts and putting that framework into a video game is not easy. This is a great example of it working. I'm sorry that this wasn't a better seller. This should have been a best hit, in my opinion. Absolutely.
Rob Letts, the director of this game, went on to work on other things like Call of Duty Finest Hour, Bulletstorm, Aquanox, Striker 95, Rise of the Robots, Primal Rage, Safecracker, Duke Nukem 64, Dragon Ball Z, Dead Zone, Star Trek Invasion. This guy's got such an incredibly long history of games. Titanfall, Crisis, all of them. Batman Begins, Burnout Paradise, Unravel 2, It Takes Two. He was the VP of EA and an EA partner for It Takes Two.
Oh wow, that game's incredible. A lot of those games are incredible. I mean, Titanfall, just
So even as a
masterpiece.
director, he's got a great understanding of being a part of projects that involve writers that dig into this level of psychology.
He's one of those people that I would love to sit down and talk to. And I genuinely hope one day this podcast grows large enough to the point where we can speak to devs directly, because what an honor to just sit here and just be like, your game was incredible, tell us more about your history and what else should we be looking forward to. And
Right. Uh, Rob Letts or David Doak or Andrew Lawson, any of you guys see this, or anybody who worked on this game sees this and wants to talk about their experience, we could be fucking like to have you on. Be
love
nice.
to talk to them.
Get some internal perspective about this one.
There's a lot of people I want to bring onto this podcast, like Jake Geller, the guys from Game Ranks, H
You
Bomber
just got like a
guy.
bucket list of
Oh my god.
special guests that
I
you'd like to
mean,
get hammered out.
I want to talk to Markiplier. I want to talk about his production work with his most recent Markiplier in space with Markiplier rather, and how he's using video aspects to create video games and his inspirations with, you know, choose your own adventure books and things like that. There are a lot of people.
His ARG.
Oh, it's so good though. Like it's so good. I mean, that's a masterpiece on YouTube.
It'd be cool to have guests. More guests would be a lot of fun, especially developer interviews. I think that's something that
I don't want to do
would give us
interviews.
a lot more insight.
I don't want to do
Just,
interviews.
have get a perspective conversation.
Yeah.
Less an interview, more just like perspective conversation from the developers who work on games like this. Because whether or not we walked away loving it or hating it or thinking it was the best or the worst thing ever, right? It doesn't even matter. Ultimately, we all walked away from it with something.
Well,
And that's worth discussing in and of itself.
what I've also noticed about us with the previous season of Monster Mecha, yes, I'm referring to it as a season, OmniaObscurium is the new season, is either we both agree or we're dichotomous. There is no we both hate it.
Right.
Very, very rarely are we both like, this game's trash.
And I don't think, it's just, I think that it'd be a hard game to find unless we actively play something like Alone in the Dark Illumination or Ride to Hell Retribution. We're not going to find something that's so objectively terrible that we both hate it.
Right. And we can still find good in the mix. And I'm sure many of those artists went on to do amazing things.
I think one game that we both definitely didn't hate, but definitely didn't like was The Last of Us. For
Oh,
different reasons, but it was one of those games where we both walked away with like a sub-average experience.
I still to this day say if you like Last of Us 1, and you should play 2, but lower your expectations. The game is overhyped.
Right.
I still think they're both good, just not to the extent that people make it out to be.
Right. It's very, very average that.
But it's
And
difficult for me to say a game is bad.
yeah, I have that same problem. There are very, very, very slim amount of games that I think are genuinely poorly made. Uh, I read Hell Retribution, Alone in the Dark Illumination, Pocket Bike Racers, and Sneak King. Hentai games.
But there are people who would disagree with you on all of those things because they're small commercialized games, or their hentai games are more of a passion project for, that specific crowd. And I'm sure there's dichotomy, and this hentai game is better than this hentai game and things like that
That is
within that
not a
community.
conversation I would want to have.
No, neither
Y'all
would
have
I.
fun conversing your hentai games philosophy, but the
Before
booba is not a deep conversation to me.
before we end it, I have one funny story for everybody. One of my first QA jobs I ever did was on a porn game.
Ow,
I
that's
know,
sad.
I know, and to this day, I honestly think it hurt my career.
Of course it fucking hurts your career. You worked on, working on. I can fucking guarantee you from You know me, you know where I operate.
Right.
Working in NSFW areas definitely hurts your reputation,
It's weird.
but that's fine. It also builds rep in other places.
Right. And to this day, I still get emails. They're like, "Oh, we want you to check out our game, and maybe you can cover it, and we'll send you a censored version so you can play both." And it's like, "No, I'm good. I'm good. I wasn't interested
You
the
like
first time. I'm not
you
interested
like
now."
the honey pop censored version.
Man, that took over the internet by a storm, didn't it?
Right.
Honey Pop.
Not just once, but twice.
Right.
Twice.
What I'm talking about was way more graphic than that.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
We're talking about like
I've
2 hour
seen
sex cutscenes, and it
the
was.
quality of Steam. Man, the quality of Steam these days. I don't know when the last time you went through the new releases tab was, but it's
I
atrocious.
have it blocked now. I went to the new
Fucking
advanced
really?
setting. Yeah, I was like, I don't want. I'm tired of this. Tired of seeing
I
it.
think it's funny. It's just like getting on Twitter and seeing some terrible shit. I'm so accustomed to it now that I can laugh it off and move on.
It's just not good for my mental health. Like seeing that stuff, like it hurts me.
You really do feel touched by what you see.
Yeah, and being somebody with like a psychological and philosophical passion for the artwork and the creation of video games, and I'm not saying that a porn game couldn't have that, but
But you don't want a porn game to touch you deeply.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
it's weird. I'm not. I'm fine if other people like it. It's just not for me.
yeah.
So
So
if
we
you,
got more better things to talk about around here.
yeah. Do you have a rating for this game and any closing thoughts?
7 out of 10. Definitely not the best game of its time or of all time or anything like that. Above average for sure. Do not play this game if you're weak in video games, if you're inexperienced, or if you don't like and clunky controls because you'll fucking hate it. But to anyone who's really a fan of retro, PlayStation 2 retro at this is retro now at this
I
point.
say
Anyone who's
classic,
a
but that's fine.
well, is it
I'm
PS1 is
older.
kind of like you're old, yeah.
Yeah, I'm old.
Boomer. Anyone who's a fan of like PlayStation 2 era games, uh, Metal Gear Solid stealth games, clunky ass games like the classic Prince of Persia or something along those lines. Anybody who's into a good psychological thriller where they don't mind taking their time, definitely worth checking out. Worth going into at least once just to have the conversation with yourself about what you're playing through.
Right. I gave it a 6 out of 10. I'm giving it 1 point lower, only because I'm sure this has to do with me playing on PC, but the clunkiness and some of the like the scenes didn't age well. It just a lot of it hit me the wrong way. I
I gave
think.
that I agree with that. I gave it 1 extra point, I think, because the style of it looks so close to Time Splitters that you can really tell it's a free radical game. They developed
Right.
a style. So it aged poorly, but it's also kind of timeless.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. This is a game that should definitely be on a lot of more people's radar. And I was gonna get into that. So 6 out of 10. And the reason why I'm giving it a higher score instead of, like a 4 out of 10 is because the story is just that important to me. This was a very touching, a very moving, a very thought provoking story that I'm probably going to be thinking about a lot moving forward, especially in my writing. There's
Right,
just
if
a
I were to
lot
judge
there.
this on story alone, like if this were a modern game made with modern shit and it was all done and it had the fixes it was supposed to have, if I were rating this game on story alone, it'd be an easy 9 out of 10.
Oh, easy. I mean, it would be up there with Medium, honestly. It'd be right up there with Medium.
Yeah, yeah, it's very unique and of itself. There really is nothing else like it.
So yeah, like he said, if you're somebody who's been playing video games for a long time, is okay with that learning curve, check it out. I mean, definitely check it out and come back and leave a comment. If you have no idea what we're talking about and you just watch this entire thing, I do have a playlist available for you, edited and unedited.
The GOG store link for Second Sight will be in the description if you want to
Yes, it
check
will.
out the game directly.
Yes, it
That's
will.
very important. Something we can provide if we can.
And
But honestly, like, look for this game on the PlayStation 2. I think you'll have a better experience.
um, I don't know. I mean, it's a 1 point difference.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It is a 1 point difference when it comes down to it.
So it makes it a tough call to make, honestly.
Play it on your favorite platform.
Yeah, play on the one that you like the most. There you go.
Exactly.
Because we
All
have
computers are good computers. Respect your computer.
kind of goes against what we said in the past, but things are changing
Yeah.
as
We're
we
getting
got
old.
older.
I'm getting old. I just turned 22 on the 13th.
Shut up. I'm turning 29.
You're fucking old, you boomer. Jeez.
Thank you guys so much for
Mhm.
watching. I appreciate all of you. Go check out Red. His link is down in the description below. You're doing your horror showcase, correct?
I have been doing the horror showcase again lately. I might stream Final Fantasy Integrate. We'll see how that goes. If I like what I see tonight, I might hold off on playing through it until I want to stream it. But I might make that a personal experience.
I hope you enjoy it. It's good. My next game is going to be Dragon's Dogma 1. I've been promising it for going on 6 years, believe it or not, and I've never played it. So it's time for me to finally pick it up and play beyond the middle of the game, which is where I stopped my first stream. And that's it from me. I mean, I'm not really doing much other than that.
Ah, I've got new song came out not that long ago. So if you go to my channel, go to the extra channels, go over to my music channel. There's more music over there. So that happened.
Hmm.
If we're just like throwing out updates.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Important. So subscribe. Start sharing it if you can.
Subscringle to our dingles.
Okay, before we go, I used to be one of those people who was like, "Oh, I'm so sick and tired of hearing subscribe and hit that bell icon and things like that." But like at this point, I'm like, maybe there's a reason why everybody does it.
It genuinely helps, and at the end of something, you're really not thinking about it, unless once you've paid attention to the rest of the video or the rest of the conversation, hitting any of the buttons below totally gets lost.
Yep. I said
But
it
it
at the
helps.
beginning, right?
Yeah,
Mm.
I think so.
Subscribe. Also, let us know what you think of the new logo in the background and the artwork. Red did the artwork. I did the layout. That's pretty freaking sweet.
And remember, like we said, comment your experience with this game if you've got one. We'd,
Oh yeah,
like
I
to go
want to
through those.
know.
That'd be cool.
I want to know if other people have played this and their experiences with it because it's so fascinating. Write me an essay. Like, seriously, don't hold back. I will read it. I'm so interested and fascinated by the different psychological
We get
ideologies that are
enough of them,
created.
we get enough of them, we'll read them during the next episode and give other people's perspectives. That'll be an
Oh,
interesting do.
we could do an OmniaObscurium sidebar where we do like another
Yeah.
podcast just checking out comment section. We'll figure it out. Leave comment suggestions, whatever. It doesn't matter. We,
Just have a conversation with us.
yeah.
Just chill out. Yeah.
And
Be our homie.
if we do receive comments moving forward, we might do episodes where we're live instead of pre-recorded, and we'll interact with the chat and things like that. We could put the chat on screen and things like that, and we can talk about your favorite games, and we can have episodes that are not dedicated to a single game, things like that. So I think that's
Thank
enough
you.
shilling. Yeah, thank you, and bye,
And have a nice day.
and sleep tight.
Yeah. And fucking don't do drugs.